So what year is this for you as head coach going in at Mountain Brook?
This will be my 5th year as the head coach here.
How long have you how long have you been at Mountain Brook though?
It's crazy. I started my coaching career at Vestavia. I was there for 9 years, and then this is actually starting my 17th here at Mountain Brook. So I
Wow.
came over when it was Bucky's first actual year of being the head coach, and
Yeah.
so I was lucky enough to be with him. His 12 years, and then now I'm starting my fifth being the head coach.
Not a bad guy to come over with.
For sure, it was awesome. Being able to learn all the stuff from him and just how his passion for the game of basketball, and obviously, how he's changed. I think he's changed how a lot of teams play at the high school level in Alabama.
Yeah.
And that was fun because I think that the way he studied it and everything else, he's such a guy that like thinks differently than a lot of people. Um,
Yeah.
and like his mindset is to make the game better. And that's his. He doesn't like to go into game like in the gyms. I remember we used to go scout and teams that would like to walk it up or like uh, just not play fast. It would drive him bonkers. So I think just to see the transformation of where high school basketball has been in that last 17 years in Alabama has been cool to watch.
Definitely. How's Ty doing out in Nebraska?
He got initiated to a little bit of cold weather this week, which has been good. It's been going well. They put him out there in the summertime, and so he I told him I was like, you're lucky. Like back in the day, is like October 15th is really like when you get to learn everything. And
Yeah.
so like they had him in there in June and July, and I think they finished up their 17th practice yesterday of official
Oh,
practice. So he's had an opportunity to be able to kind of get initiated to that level. He's doing well. He's having a good time. They have a preseason scrimmage tomorrow at Iowa State,
oh
and so
wow.
that'll be good. And then next week, that's a closed scrimmage. And then next week they actually host Purdue, and so my wife is going out there to watch that. That'll be fun. Um,
Man, those are some good tests right off the bat.
Yeah, and the good thing is like it doesn't go against your record, but
Yeah.
at the same time, you can go against somebody else, and those are two good teams to have
Yeah.
to go against.
Yeah, I saw I guess it was probably the AP poll that I saw. Like, I think Iowa State was like fifth preseason. I
Yep.
didn't, I didn't look for Purdue, but I'm sure they'll be. I mean, even though they lost, they lost Zach Edey. Good thing he's not playing against him. That dude's
Yeah.
like 12 feet tall.
Yeah.
But
Well, a
that
lot of
and
the
but
guards are back, and so like they're
guards are
actually
back.
picked to win the Big Ten, and like those are
Jeez.
preseason predictions or whatever else. But yeah,
Yeah.
Iowa State's really good. They're number 5, and the one thing I know that they got like 4 of their 5 starters back, which in this day and age I don't think is normal.
Yeah.
And they really guard you, so I think that'll be a tough scrimmage for them.
Yeah. Well, how about your team? Who are some guys, as y'all are getting ready to get this season going? How are y'all kind of looking in practice right now?
Like we graduated obviously 8 guys last year.
Wow.
And that was always a really good senior class to begin with, like just how they played together and their knack for caring about each other and different intangible things that they brought to the table. So
Yeah.
I think they left a good legacy for these younger guys. We got Jack Bakken. It's a senior. He was an all area performer for us last year. He just committed to Sewanee.
Oh yeah.
Earlier in the week, which is good. Matt Kuvion, who also played some minutes for us last year, is another senior that we have back. My other son, Trey Davis, who played some decent minutes last year for us and made some big shots in some big games and hit some big threes in the championship game. He's back, and that junior class that we have coming up, like there's some good players in there. They've always been a successful group, and so we just got to get them initiated to playing varsity basketball
Yeah.
and get them to learn from whatever their success and their failures are going to be, and hopefully we'll be ready to roll by the time January rolls around.
Yeah. So you mentioned a minute ago talking about Bucky about kind of the speed they play with and that kind of thing. Let's talk shot clock because
Yep.
it's finally here. I
Sure.
know it. I know for some people it's a controversial thing. Like some people are like, I'm on the side who likes it, and
Yep.
then there's people who are like, hey, if they haven't had it, just learn to play the game that way. But where do you kind of land on it, and are you going to utilize it this year?
We are. We're getting them. They haven't been put in our gym yet, but we ordered them this summer. I was extremely excited to see it come out to where it was going to be an option for that to happen. Just because I think at the end of the day, it makes the game of basketball better. If you really look at a lot of stuff, like they talk about Europe and how like they've kind of are passing us up, and you look at the NBA draft and in the lottery, there was more Europeans chosen than American basketball players. And a lot of the stuff they always go back to is because of how much they practice and how much they develop their players. But I do know, and I've heard like they use shot clocks like in their lower levels over there, and so I think it's something that I think you're always anytime you're going to have change in the game of basketball or in anything in life, there's always going to be pushback. But I really think this is going to be a good thing because it's going to keep the pace of the play. It's going to make some people have to get out of their comfort zone and actually have to change. And I'll be honest with you, like we still, with not having the shot clock, there might be some times in some games in these last couple of years where, like, if we've gotten a lead and the team might be a little bit more athletic than us, like we would maybe offensively take a little bit more time. Not necessarily saying that we're stalling, but we would really, work it to where we're going to get the most efficient shot possible. And now it's like, to me, I think what's good about the shot clock is it's going to keep a good pace going to where like it'll allow teams to come back and someone can't just sit on the ball. I also don't think it's been a good thing whenever that was just a few years ago, there was a game that was 4-2. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like we don't want to look up and be where Alabama basketball, high school basketball is in the news because of something like that.
yeah,
And so I think this is a great thing. One thing I think it'll be a challenge this year is like when you talk about it, like, and a lot of the coaches that we go against, because the rules are this year, you can have the shot clock, and then both the head coaches got to kind of like agree to be able to use it in a non-area game. And everybody that's on our schedule, they said they're cool with that taking place. Now, some of them might not have it when we go on the road, but for the most part, everybody is good with doing it. I do know. I think it'll be kind of like two different seasons. Like you'll have that. Then when we get into area play, you don't. So some of the strategy of how it was without it will come into play. But I do know. I remember when some of Bucky's teams, we would go over to Atlanta for some of the hoops giving tournaments, and there was always a 35-second shot clock in those games. And I'll be honest with you, and it probably is because the level of play and the players were so good, but it never came into play because there was both teams were getting efficient shots pretty quickly, and so very rarely did the shot clock even get under 10 seconds in those games. And
wow,
so, like I think it'll be a struggle on some things. I know because one thing I think that could be a little bit of a challenge. We're at a shortage for referees. I know we were last year. You're going to have another clock operator to do this.
yep.
But at the end of the day, I just think it's gonna be a good thing for basketball.
By the time y'all get to that area, you will have played what, about two-ish months or so before you get to January.
Yes.
And if you're using it in these, non-area, non-playoff games this year, kind of as a test run, so to speak, do you think your guys by that time, if y'all have been able to use it that much, that once you get into area play, even though the shot clock's not there, do you think the offense will be pretty much kind of used to playing in that way? And will you change much at all? Does that make sense?
Yeah, exactly. I know what you're saying because, like, and you've seen us play over the years. We like to play fast. Like, I mean, our
Yeah.
goal is to get the ball out of the net or on a miss, and we're trying to score within 7 seconds. After that, then we're going to break you down and we're going to run offense. And so,
Yeah.
I do think with the shot clock, what it's going to do is it's going to put us in situations to where, like, sometimes if we would ever have a possession that would last 45 seconds to a minute, that's going to take that out of there with the 35-second shot clock. And will that, make our pattern and our habits get to where we're going to play at that pace? I definitely think it will, but I think that'll be a positive thing for us. I think that'll be a good situation, and I think it'll keep our guys locked into like knowing they got to be crisp and with their cuts and how they drive the basketball into the areas they need to get to. And I think it'll keep us locked into what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I wish this would have happened years and years ago. Back when I was in high school, I went to Hewitt Trustful, and when I was there, Basketball is the sport we kind of had my last couple years. Like football, right around 500. Baseball, not too good. We had a really good golf team. I was on that, but nobody cared. But basketball, I mean, this is when Jeremiah Millington was
Yeah.
on the team that now coaches over at Leeds. I think he's
Leads.
still at
Yes.
Leeds.
Yeah.
So Jeremiah was like running point his senior year. You had Justin Tubbs was a junior on that
Yeah.
team. Christian Watford was there for a minute. I think he
Yeah.
played. No way, yeah. Christian played there as like a freshman maybe
Right.
before he moved over to Shades Valley, and then
Mhm.
obviously Brendan with you guys. So they were loaded, and they would play. It ultimately every year for about 3 years. It felt like we would go to regionals up at Jacksonville, and it would ultimately be Hewitt Trussville versus those Huffman teams
Mhm.
that had Demetrius Jemison,
Yes.
Stanley Robinson,
Mhm.
and every now and then you'd see Andre Smith out there setting a pick, and
That's
that was
crazy.
something.
Yeah.
But I can't imagine games like that back then had there been a shot clock. Now those teams would play pretty quick because, like you kind of mentioned, incredibly efficient offenses. Their styles were to get up and down the floor. But
Mhm.
I remember being in the student section at times. I can't remember the teams, but we'd be at home and they would try to slow them down, and the opponent they'd literally just hold the ball. Like
Yeah.
it was almost like, I mean, it'd be first quarter, it would seem like, and it was like they were trying to run out the clock, and it was just the
Mhm.
most boring thing to watch. And
Yes.
I'm glad that we've finally got this now, at least as a test run.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's what like when Bucky's put the system in of us pressing and everything else. That's always kind of like got the pace of play up to where like I'll go into some games in these last couple of years where like I feel like we're probably a favorite. And like the one thing I always tell our coaches is like the one thing in this game that's going to scare me is if this team gets a lead and then tries to sit on the ball a little bit. The only thing is like we usually have a little bit of an answer somehow, some way in which we can amp you up, whether it be something in our half court trapping stuff or in our full court stuff. So that's always been good to us. Last year the rule changed, and I'm sure you remember like it used to be 7 fouls for a
Yeah.
bonus, and then like everything got taken away with one-on-ones. So like every quarter, basically, you have to get to 5 fouls. Once you do,
Right.
it's 2 shots. Well, I come to find out, I thought that rule was like, man, that might be a good thing because it'll help us reset because sometimes we foul a lot.
Yeah.
But ultimately, I started to find out, and I talked to some of the officials, and they said, that rule's really the fouling rule really is supposed to coordinate with a shot clock. So I think now, like to me, like when you're putting both of them together, now we got some. Now we're starting to flow in the right direction to where like we're making basketball more efficient for the players to play, the coaches to coach, and for people to watch. And I think that's a good thing.
How much like practicing so far and stuff? I know it's still kind of early, but like the adjustment you've seen, like for you as a coach, coaching now with the shot clock in mind for some games, and the players, like maybe it hasn't affected y'all much because, like you said, like y'all are trying to score in 7 seconds. But maybe have you heard from other coaches that have maybe played slower or that kind of thing over the years, like what this early transition has been like for them and their teams?
I haven't talked to many coaches right now about it or how they're utilizing it
Yeah,
or whatever else. Honestly, we haven't even really practiced with it yet because I just feel like there's other things that we're trying to cover.
yeah,
And official practice starts on Monday, so we'll have plenty of opportunities to be able to practice some of that stuff. I remember because like playing in college, that was the one thing. I grew up in Indiana, and then when I played at Sanford, that was where I first got played with a shot clock, and a lot of the times. Um, like you'll have like some coaches will do some different things when it gets to 10 seconds, they'll trigger something that maybe like a ball screen or something from that standpoint. I think my mindset's going to be like, we got to get the best shot possible. Our bench will be engaged to like, we're going to have a countdown to where like our guys are hearing that. And then, so they know. And so we have some different counters and some different things we go to when it gets to that. So our guys will be, they'll be practiced up on that and they'll have an understanding. Because at the end of the day, I remember when I was in college, the one thing I always hated was when someone would throw me the ball and there was 1 or 2 seconds on the shot clock, and then I gotta rip a three from 35 feet that wasn't a good one, and it's so like that would kill me, but at the same time, it's like I think
Yeah.
that you know I hope that doesn't end up happening a good bit, and I think with us just being efficient, getting our guys skilled up, it'll end up working itself out. End of the
Yeah.
day, if we have a shot clock violation, then I know we can set our press. So like I'd rather have some things happen like that than as opposed to what we call as pick six turnovers, to where like all of a sudden the clock dictated us to play out of control or to do something that would be something that we don't want to do. So there'll be some hiccups and there'll be some learning experiences, especially with a little bit of an inexperienced team. But at the end of the day, you know, it'll end up being a good thing in the long run.
Yeah. Do you think this is something that, like, I don't know what the AHSAA's plans are, but is this something that, like, testing out now that they're maybe hoping to implement just across the board in the future, or is that
Well,
what your read on it is?
well, I would think for them to go ahead and say and okay it in the spring, and I don't think anybody was expecting this. This kind of came out of left field,
It did, yeah.
because I was down a couple, it was like 2 or 3 years ago that every school kind of voted on if we were going to do it or not. And I don't want to get into details, but like there was a meeting and like the way the AHSA kind of like what I want to say, like sold it to the coaches. They basically
Yeah,
sold it to where it was a scare tactic, to where like they were going to make a lot of people, a lot of schools that might not have a lot of money, scared that they couldn't raise it to be able to get the shot clocks. And so like I didn't think that was handled correctly, but it is what it is. So when this came out of left field that they were going to let us do it, I would think that they're doing it as a test run, to where like if it's not next year, it should be the year after that we would
yeah,
actually have it going on.
yeah.
I mean, you think about it, the state championship game last year, Buckhorn hit a shot at the buzzer, and it was the first year that we actually had it implemented to where like you could go back and watch video, you
Mhm.
know. And that was funny is like that rule was only for a play that was going to happen at the buzzer, and obviously that played out for the good thing for us because he actually released it with the ball in his hands with the after the clock. But to me, it's like we're doing that in a state championship game. I would think we're knocking on the door to where this is going to end up being used in area games and then also in the playoffs.
That's awesome. I can't wait till that happens. Hopefully sooner rather than later.
Absolutely.
Just makes it so much, like, I don't know, like I like what a shot clock, kind of how you've talked about. Like, there are certain teams, you know, men or boys and girls basketball over the years that have just sat on it, and it's awful to watch. And I just like I understand there's a kind of a strategy in that. I think it's a lazy strategy
Mm-hmm.
personally,
Yep.
but I I think it's cool to put that time clock, that shot clock on it, to really. I think it just helps these players learn better. Like, it's not just standing around or, kind of, like I said, being kind of lazy with it. Like, it's forcing you to actually execute. And I think that just helps everybody's basketball IQ more than anything.
Absolutely, because really, old school wise, you could probably run flex or some type of pattern
Yeah.
offense that basically you have your players are kind of robots. And it's like it's not making them have to get skilled up to become a better player. It's not making the coaches really have to expand their mindset to get better as coaching offense. And so I think this does all those things.
Yeah.
You're a Celtics fan, right? I'm a Celtics fan.
Oh,
What's
yeah.
the one thing when you're watching NBA games that's kind of cool? Like you'll watch a game and in the first half, it's the second quarter, and your team's down by 20. And you look up in the fourth quarter and it ends up being closer. It might get flipped.
Yeah.
Why? It's a 24-second shot clock. It keeps the
Yeah.
pace going to where a team can't just sit on it and can't just dictate tempo. It's going to constantly keep the pace flowing for both teams, and it makes the game more efficient and more fun to watch and more fun to be a part of. So I'm, like whatever hiccups or whatever different things that might be a challenge with all of it, like I'm just excited that it's going to be there, and I think it's going to be a good thing. And it's you're not going to be able to tell me anything different. My mind's made up. I'm in full excited mode to be able to have it.
Yeah. How does, forgive me for not looking, but y'all's area this year, y'all only got 3 teams in the area, right?
Yes, this is the first time in my time coaching that I've ever been a part of a three-team area. It's kind of weird. We're with Huffman and Woodlawn, and
That's
so
right.
when they did the they redid a lot of the stuff. There's like 8 or 9
Yeah.
areas for 6A that are like 3-team areas. Then you have 1 or 2 that have like 5 teams in it. It's just, it's kind of crazy how some of the stuff's done.
Yeah.
It's a little bit different because, like we're kind of a method, like we have a method to our madness and everything else. And it's like we get to January, it's usually like 3 weeks to where like we've always had a 4-team area. And so it's like you're playing someone Tuesday and Friday. You're getting a good rhythm and a good understanding of what's going on, which this year it's a little bit of a different thing with only 3 teams, how I had to do the scheduling and everything else. So that'll be a little bit of a different deal. But, Huffman, we've had some great battles with Huffman over the years.
Yeah.
Usually we end up facing them at Jacksonville State. Back in the times when Trendon was here, we had some really good battles. They were in our area. And, so that rivalry will be back. We're going to be playing them a minimum of 2 times, if not 3. And then you have the opportunity to play them 4 times. So, like that'll be fun to be a part of. As a coach, it's like that's what we're always looking for. We're looking for good venues, good teams to go against, and they always bring our level of play up. And Woodlawn has been a traditional powerhouse too. I know they've been a little bit down in the last few years, but they got good players, and you got to bring it when you're playing them as well. So they'll be challenged games for our players to be able to go in those games against.
Yeah. I need to look up how that. I've got the book open, but I admittedly didn't look at how the bracket works for a 3-team area. I know it's in here, but I just didn't look at it. But man, that seems bizarre.
It
3-team
is.
area. Man,
And there's so many of them. It just seems like there could have been a
yeah.
better way to where we could at least slotted more 4 teams somehow, some way, and
Yeah.
then maybe just had a couple that had to be 3. But it is what it is, and everybody will deal with it.
That's right. How'd you become a Celtics fan?
So my dad and granddad were huge Celtics fans growing up. So Larry Bird, like I hit that age when I grew up in the '80s,
Yeah.
and those '80s Celtics were like they were big time,
They're
and so
different. Yeah.
yeah. So that's really where like that kind of got my love for them going. And one of my best friends in high school, he was actually a second cousin of Larry Bird. And so
Oh.
we got some cool stories and some different things that was always the deal with that. And so that's where my love for it's always happened with that. And I've just continued to like them after that. Or
Yeah.
that's their
Well,
tradition. I mean, they kind
yeah.
of flow with what the game of basketball is championships and tradition, playing the game the right way. So that's kind of like my deal with them.
Yeah, that's kind of where that's kind of where I come from with it. I'm also a big history guy,
Yeah.
and the Celtics history is just crazy. Like
Yeah.
it was about it's close to 10 years ago. I went to Boston for the first time, and it's still my it's still my favorite vacation that I ever took. And me and my wife just loved it up there. Like it was the most like I got the most. I don't know how to say. It's kind of almost Southern hospitality feel that I've ever
Hmm.
gotten somewhere in the North,
Sure.
which was unexpected. And like, because I've been to New York, and that's a different animal. And I was overwhelmed, and I wasn't a big fan of a lot of the people, and
Mhm.
that place is just overwhelming. Like you've got to have the funds to get around New York
Yeah.
without it being a pain. And
Sure.
Boston was so easy. It was like the biggest small town that I've
I
been
I
to.
agree. I mean, like you talk to a lot of people, they all say that same thing.
Yeah,
Like it's for being a big city, it doesn't feel that way.
yeah, yeah.
And then like
The
the
Green Line is
history,
easy.
yeah, the history is just that when you're there is just really cool.
Yeah,
You being
yeah.
a historian.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
we did all the history stuff. Like I mean, we did the Fenway tour.
Mhm.
Obviously, we watched people dump some tea into the bay. We did all the things.
Yeah.
We saw where Paul Revere was, all that.
Yeah.
But then we did the TD Garden tour. There was the New England Sports Museum. I forget exactly what it's called, but we did all that. Went in TD Garden, and I had been kind of pulling for the Celtics, like a little bit, and
Right.
that kind of deal. And once I went up there, like I already had that kind of leaning toward Boston, and I felt
Sure.
drawn to Boston for some reason. And then when we were up there, I was like, this is it. Like,
Yeah.
this is it. And so I've been a fan ever since.
Yeah.
Just love it up there.
I remember in high school, my parents, we went up there for a summertime, and I was at the old Boston Garden, but I actually did the tour that you're talking about.
Yeah.
And they were starting to build, it was called the Fleet Center when it's actually
Yeah.
what the TD Garden is now. But it's like, it was built like, I don't know, like 5 feet right there, right behind the old Boston Garden.
Yeah.
I actually was lucky enough to go to the old Boston Garden. It was Larry Bird's actually last season. He was hurt that year, but
Yeah.
it was still cool to see the Chief and Kevin McHale and Reggie Lewis, who passed away, but was the next
Yeah.
guy that was their franchise player. But man,
Hmm.
it's just the way they're passionate about it, and it has that small town feel.
Yeah. Loved it. You ever met Brad Stevens? You ever had the chance?
I have not. I wish I could. I've actually with Ty playing AAU, and his son,
Mm.
Brad's son, played for a team out of Boston called the Middlesex Magic. I saw him at some different events. I waved to him. I didn't didn't have enough heart to go sit down and
Yeah.
bug him because he was watching his son play. But
True.
him being from Indianapolis, my sister actually lives in Indianapolis, and my brother-in-law, like they've met him before. I mean, and I think the Celtics have gone to another level since he's gone from coaching to the front office. Like he's just a
Yeah.
mastermind on the stuff that he does, which is really
Yeah.
cool.
What? That's what I was going to ask you about him because, like, I mean, I followed him when he was at Butler,
Mhm.
and because like, what was he doing before that? Like, wasn't he like selling insurance or
Yeah,
like
he,
something like that?
he was a D3 player in Indiana, and
Yeah,
then I think that he was going out to be a financial advisor.
financial
And
advisor.
but he was also like a GA maybe at Butler when that was happening or taking place. And I think they offered him some kind of, I can't remember who the coach was at the time, maybe Thad Matta, but they offered him an
Maybe.
opportunity to be maybe one of the coaches or something that was on their staff. And then he's just like so bright in the stuff that he does. I think he just kind of worked his way pretty quickly to where he was.
Man, like what? Like, how does a guy get a basketball mind like that can go from GA D3 kind of player to ultimately to where he is now, front office guy for the Celtics? Like, is it mostly analytics? Is he like does he just know the game that well? Like, I'm sure you've studied him a little bit over the years. Like, what is it about him that makes him so good at basketball?
Well, I think the one thing, if you ever like listen to him or hear his stories, now I'm not an expert on him, but I have studied him because it's like, he has a lot of humility to him. Like growing up and being the player that he was, I think that he was always a student of the game. So he really studied it. And then it's like, if you really think about him, he was a financial advisor that became a coach, right? So like I kind of plays into probably him being the analytical stuff part of the game. And then into the front office is probably how he can handle a lot of the salary cap and some of those different types of
Yeah,
things. But his relationships and probably understanding a lot of stuff, you know, Ronald Norred, I don't know if you remember the
yeah,
name that played at
yeah.
Homewood. I was
Homewood,
over
yeah,
a little bit during the time we'd work out a little bit in the summertime, and I know he went and played for him, and that's right at the cusp of when they really kind of took off at Butler.
yeah.
And I know and Ronald's in the coaching game. I think he coaches for one of the NBA teams, but he used to rave about just the toughness that he instilled in them, but like also just how he's such a great teacher and making them all understand things and be better. So
Yeah.
I think when
Yeah.
you got to have good players. I think when you do that and you mix all that stuff together, I mean, Gordon Hayward's probably one of the best guys to ever come through Butler. Shelvin Mack, some of those guys, like they really helped amp him up into doing what he did. And I think that how he coached those guys and to the fundamentals and to coach it to their system. And then I just think I think the Celtics probably took a chance on him when Doc Rivers got fired and they brought him in. But I think that you've ever heard like LeBron and a lot of these other like big time players, they've always just had the highest amount of respect for him, for the sets that he runs and his mind for the game. And I think his relationships that he builds with the players is like second to none. And in this day and age, I think that's what it's all about.
Absolutely. I still can't believe that Hayward heave against Duke didn't go down.
Yeah, you
I
thought
thought
that
it
would be
was
for sure.
I thought it was good. Man, I wanted it to be good too.
Yeah,
That was quite a
for,
story.
for sure.
Um, just to kind of wrap up, so like talking about Brad Stevens, I'm curious your thoughts because it took me a while to place where I remembered him from, but Joe Mazzulla, the Celtics head coach now, played at West Virginia, and I think me and him are around the same age. And I remember like thinking back to him playing guard, and I was like, oh, that's where I know him from. How did he make this rise? And then seeing how well respected he is
Yeah.
as a coach, and how quickly has been kind of mind blowing to me. But honestly, not completely unlike Brad Stevens. What is it about him that's made him so successful?
If you hear him talk, like he's like extremely smart, the way he thinks
Yeah.
outside the box. I mean, you hear like a lot of their players, like the one thing they talk about is how he in practice he does things differently than a lot of others. Where
Mhm.
like they might not have a ball for the first 20 minutes, so they're just like doing a lot of mental reps on different
Wow.
things. I think his relationships that he has with the players is like second to none. If you really think about it, like Emmy, like the coach they had got in trouble, and so like all of a sudden it was like this was handed to him, and it was a championship caliber team. The first year he kind of struggled, and I think they struggled in the playoffs. They got to the Eastern Conference Finals, but they got beat by the Heat, and I think that a lot of people were throwing stuff at him. I thought that his humility and his faith kind of allowed him to be like, I'm just gonna dominate each day and coach these guys to the best I can. And you really look at it like he's a fearless coach. He has
Yeah.
respect from every one of those players. I love hearing his interviews because I just think he's amazing.
Yes.
But they talk about like I think he had one opportunity where like he could have been an assistant with the Celtics, and he might have took like another spot somewhere else, just to help with his development as a coach. And I think like this humility that he had during that stretch, then all of a sudden he was rewarded, having the job that he does. But I don't think that this would have been a job that he would have necessarily had if Emi Aduka didn't get in trouble.
Yeah.
But it worked out like it did. And kudos to Missoula because it's like he obviously was ready to be able to do it.
Oh,
Obviously, as a championship caliber team, I mean, the players he has are unbelievable. But at the same time, he still has to lead them. He still has to put them in spots. He still has to be able to um, keep a lot of egos and a lot of guys that are all stars pulling in the right direction. So I, I think he's done an amazing job, and I don't think he gets a lot of respect from the league. I think they always vote certain things, and they might
yeah.
say he's not one of the top 10 coaches in the league. And you hear all these different reporters talk a little bit, and they're just like, "That's crazy."
Yeah.
When you've seen what he's done in 2 years, so
Yeah.
like I think he's awesome. I'm happy he's the coach of the Seas.
Me too. Me too. And he was that close to having JJ Redick on that staff.
yeah,
I remember that from one of Reddick's podcast shows, and because now back in about the same age again. Reddick's well, he's a little older than me, but as usual, just like everybody else, hate that guy from Duke, but developed such a respect for him and
yeah,
love just how he breaks down games. He's just like I think he calls himself and others sickos. When
hmm
it comes to
yep,
really getting into the X's and O's of the game, and he's a sicko. But I love listening to him. And when he said that he was that close to becoming an assistant on Missoula's staff, I was so sad because I was like, he was that
yeah.
close, and then he takes the Lakers job, and I'm like, no.
I'll be honest with you. I wouldn't want to coach the Lakers with LeBron and Bronny and having to deal with that. You know what I mean?
No,
But
no.
no,
I
JJ
am.
is amazing. I love listening to his
Yeah.
podcast too. He's awesome.
I wish he could still do it, but I get. I mean, he's a head coach of the Los Angeles Lakers now. He can't do it, but
Yeah,
I am curious to watch how they play because now I'm starting to see in this preseason, you're starting to see Anthony Davis start popping a lot more threes. Like I think
yeah,
last night at one point he was like 4 out of 5, and that's kind of scary. But they are still in the Western Conference,
yeah,
so might be tough.
for sure. And I just think too, like, I mean, I'm not gonna like LeBron's obviously in the I mean, I'm Michael Jordan's my goat, but like he's
Same.
obviously a lot of people's goat. I also think he's a little bit of a coach killer if you like kind of look at his backtrack of some different things.
Yeah.
And so it's like it'll be interesting to see. I know JJ is kind of a guy I feel like he's handpicked for this as well.
Yeah.
So we'll see how that's going to roll with everything.
Yeah, it did make it seem like when him and LeBron started that podcast, the Mind the Game, It
Yeah.
did seem it started, and then what? Darvin Ham gets fired or whatever. It was
Yeah.
like, okay, it's gonna be Reddick. Like
Yeah.
it felt very very handpicked. So
For sure.
we'll see how it turns out. But Celtics are gonna repeat. So
That's right.
no no, I'm not worried about LA or anybody else
For
because
sure.
Tatum, Brown, White, all those guys, they're
Yeah,
they're gonna come through again.
absolutely.
Wasn't their first round? Who's that first round draft pick? When did it?
Taylor Shireman from Creighton.
I was gonna say it was a Creighton guy.
Yes. So Ty was lucky enough to be at the little draft party thing that they had for him when he did it, and so
Really?
he was getting like frustrated because he thought he might be going around the 20 to 25
Yeah.
thing, and when that ended up happening, it was just like, oh, this is cool, you know?
Yeah, man. If you're expecting to go 2025, but you slide just to that wherever you ended up 30, 31,
Yeah.
whatever, but you end up in a organization like that,
Yes.
take the slide. I mean, a little less money, but
Yeah.
you're gonna win.
And at the end
And
of the day, he's going to learn from he's going to
yes,
learn and be in that franchise. That's pretty big time.
that's awesome. Well, that just makes your C's fandom burn even more.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you, Coach. Thank you for doing this, and especially talking about your guys and about this new era of high school basketball in Alabama with the shot clock. And wish you guys a lot of luck this year, and be following along.
Thanks, Gary. I appreciate you having me on. I've followed you. I know you do good work, and I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Coach.
Take